Arizona Sunshine launched back in 2016. The sequel, Arizona Sunshine 2, launched in 2023, 7 years later. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the two games to see how far VR game development has come, not just visually, but from other aspects like gameplay, animations and sound design. If you don't know what the Arizona Sunshine games are, they're zombie shooters, and when the first game released, it was one of the few full games with a single player story driven campaign. Most of the gameplay consists of shooting zombies, so let's look at that first. In the first game, you have a good amount of variety with male and female zombies. Some would have growths on them, but wouldn't affect how you kill them. Some are tall, some look like they were in the office when they turned, and some look like they were still getting dressed. It doesn't take long before you start to see duplicates though. The zombies are also basically two types. You've got slow zombies, and you've got fast ones, but they all die very easily with one shot to the head. Occasionally, you do have some that are wearing a hat or helmet which takes more shots, but most of them are one-shot kill. In the second game, visually they look much better. They've also done a good job of adding more variety. You can have some pretty large hordes and not see repeats of the same zombie types. They do have the same zombie types with some that move slowly and some that run at you, and again like the first game you've got some with hats or helmets which need more than one shot. But on top of those, they've also got the ones with growths on the head, but unlike the first game, this does actually affect how hard they are to kill. Sometimes it can take 2, 3 or even 4 shots to the head before they drop. They've got some fatties that are much harder to kill. It can take a few headshots as the chubby cheeks absorb all the bullets. There are also some in the game that have got riot gear like armour. You have to use your dog companion to rip off the helmet before you can headshot them. I'll talk more about Buddy later. Another really nice feature in the sequel is the gore and dismemberment system. With the first game, the headshots do make a satisfying crunch, but now you actually blow parts of the head off with flying chunks. You can shoot different parts of the bodies and chunks of skin will fly off, revealing flesh and bone. You can shoot the arms and legs off, and this adds a lot to the gunplay, making the guns feel powerful and satisfying. The animations have also been improved. In the first game they could look a little bit janky, like here where a zombie breaks down a fence. In the second game, they generally move around the environment much more realistically. You've got moments where they're climbing over fences or walls to get to you. I'll talk more about gunplay changes later, but I think it's also worth looking at the graphics overall. These are a big step up. If we look at the Canyon Horde level in both games, you can see that the first game looked dated even when it released, and it looks much better in the headset, but nothing special. The sequel has got much more detail in the environments, better textures, and much nicer lighting. Both games feature abandoned cars that you can loot. The car models have obviously been improved in the new game, and you've got much more variety. With the first game, you see the same few cars plonked on a map in different places. The developers have clearly learnt a lot about level design and set dressing, as vehicles in the sequel just look much more believable in the way that they've been positioned and with the details. For example, early on in the first game you come across this bridge, you've got a bunch of cars strewn across the road. There's a truck parked up and the front wheels are floating in the air. Early on in the sequel, you go into a parking lot area and the attention to detail makes such a huge difference. You've got this truck parked up with dust all over it, and you can see that the tyres have been partially buried from all the sand that's built up and collected around the wheels of the truck. There's a car next to it that's partially covered with a tarp, and there are objects like this wheeler bin that have been knocked over next to the truck, just lying on the ground. Pieces of paper everywhere. It just looked so much more believable, and you can really get a sense of how this place hasn't been lived in or been taken care of for a while. If you go around the corner, you find some patio furniture with used bottles and an open tin can of food lying around, which makes it feel like people were here before and had to leave in a hurry. Everything feels higher quality with way more attention to detail, and this adds massively to the overall feeling of presence and immersion when playing in VR. They've also added some cool effects in the game as well. Like some of the cars have got heat haze coming from the metal as the sun bakes down on the surface. These are things that were missing from the original, and they sound small, but it adds up to a much better quality game. The majority of the levels in the first game were outside in the typical Arizona orange coloured rocks. There was a section where you went into a mine with a flashlight. You also find a flashlight which you can use to light your way. You would have some small buildings to go inside to loot and find keys, but it did lack in variety. The sequel has a lot more variety. Early on in the game, you go into an airport with sections in the dark with a flashlight. You have a set piece crossing a runway. Just going through the check-ins, runway and baggage areas gives more variety in this location alone compared to the entire first game. You go into some suburbs, going through houses and backyards. There are sections in the sewers, a cool section on a moving train. The pacing is great, consistently adding new areas to spice things up with moments of quiet with a few stragglers. Then you have sections where you get overwhelmed and have to fight hordes. One section in particular is in a biker's hideout, which was pretty tough, with zombies dropping from balconies above, leaving you with not many options to move. There are sections where you have no choice but to run as you get completely overwhelmed by massive hordes. They also have some changes to the environment, like a section with thick smoke and another with a sandstorm that affects your visibility. The first game did have some little set pieces, like a horde coming down the side of a cliff with a falling school bus.
Shit! Here they come.
But the sequel has way more and they are much higher quality.
Holy shit! Hey! Hey! Over here! Hey! Down here!
Another big step forward from the original is the gun handling. The first game had a very simple reload. You would press a button to eject the magazine, then simply bring the weapons to your chest to reload it. When the game first released, it also only had one-handed weapons, so pistols, Uzis, and a sawn-off shotgun. They did add two-handed rifles later on in an update, but they reload the same. You eject and then bring to your chest. The game was built around dual wielding, so you couldn't two-handle pistol either. The sequel feels much more modern, with full manual reloading for all the guns, with two-handed weapons included in the game. They've got a nice system for magazines that slides into pistols or rifles in the game. As you bring your hand up to the bottom, the magazine slots in and you have to manually move your hand all the way to the top so it clicks into place. From there you have to rack a slide on a pistol or pull back a charge handle as you would expect. Some guns have got different reloads, like the double-barreled shotgun needs to be grabbed from the front to split it open. The old shells pop out, you then manually have to grab and put in the new shells, and once done you can flick your wrist to close it. There's a revolver which pops out the cylinder with the magazine eject button press. You have to manually tip the revolver back to drop out the empty bullet casings, then grab a clip and slot it into the cylinder before flicking it back closed. It feels great, but does make it harder to reload in the heat of battle, so you end up sticking with the pistol or Desert Eagle. With the pistols, as the magazine goes in, your hand also snaps to the two-handed position. The sequel allows you to two-hand one-handed weapons this time, which does affect the recoil of the guns, so one-handing the guns will kick more, making them less accurate. I do have a couple of minor niggles with the gun handling. The two-handing a one-handed weapon, you have to bring your hand together and also press the grip button on the offhand. I personally prefer a proximity system for one-handed weapons, as you just have to bring your hands together and you don't have to keep holding the grip button. Having to press the grip with two-handed pistols can also cause issues where you would accidentally grab the slide at the top of the pistol instead of two-handing it. Another issue is with the holster system. You've got an ammo pouch at the front, you grab that area to grab a magazine and then bring it to the gun, but both me and a couple of friends had moments several times where we would grab the magazine, then bring it to the pistol and the mag would go back into the ammo pouch. You have to make sure that your hands are held out in front to stop this from happening, and we had times where we thought we'd reloaded, but actually the magazine went back into our ammo pouch and we died, which was frustrating. I'm not really a fan of the ammo sat in front like that. I'd much prefer to be able to reach over the shoulder, which would also solve this issue from happening. Another problem with holsters and ammo pouch is when trying to pick things up off the ground. The first game didn't have a distant grab system. You had to have your hand pretty much touching the object if you wanted to pick it up. The new game lets you pick things up from a distance, which mostly works well, but sometimes, if you've got something close to your feet, you would end up grabbing a gun on your holster or ammo instead of the thing that you wanted. You would have to move back a bit so that the item was in front of you rather than at your feet. The first game didn't have collisions, so your hands or objects, like your gun, just go through the environment. This could affect the gameplay for things like doors. Opening a door required you to grab the handle and your hand would disappear. If you tried to push the door open with your hand, it would just go through it. Now, in the sequel, you have full collisions, so you can use your hand or gun to push open the door. It makes it feel much more intuitive and immersive when going through buildings. It also helps with things like buttons, which you can just push with your hand or gun. There's a section where you have to hold down a button to go through a door by resting something on it. There are some nice improvements to smaller things as well, like in the first game, if you shoot through glass, the bullet will go through, but you only get a glass shattering sound, but the glass doesn't break. Now in the sequel, if you shoot windows, the glass will break into smaller pieces. A new feature for the sequel is melee weapons. In the original, you couldn't actually hurt zombies with melee weapons, they would just go through them. Now, you get machetes and fire axes which you can use to attack zombies with. They do have a nice crunchy feel with the way that they penetrate the head and you can chop off limbs. It's not the best system, but it's still a nice addition. The weapons do break though, so you can't just use them all the time, and they're mainly there for when you need to save bullets or get stuck mid-reload with a mob attacking you. You also get a dog companion. This adds a lot to the game, making it feel less lonely if you're playing it single player, and you can also pet buddy, make him play fetch with a zombie arm. You can make him wear hats you find in the game, store weapons on him, and you can command him to attack zombies for you, which sometimes you need, like the heavy armoured ones that I mentioned earlier. You also need him sometimes to crawl through gaps to move zombies out of the way of doors or fetch keys. You can even get him to climb into a shopping trolley and push him around. Another great thing about having the companion in the game is it makes the voiceover work. In the first game, I found the voiceover of your own character pretty annoying at times. He still talks a lot in the second game, but a lot of the talk is directed towards the dog, which makes way more sense than just having someone talk to themselves all the time.
It's the best feeling, buddy. You'll see. When the military finds us, you'll see.
I found the dialogue actually funny at times as well, and it didn't annoy me like the first game did.
I am parched. Oh, I'm so thirsty. All right, I put a cigarette out in that one. Oh, it smells like hot burps in here. Oh, right, I pissed in that one.
The last things that I'll touch on are the game length and price. The first game was about 3 to 4 hours long. The sequel took me and a couple of friends about 7 hours. When it first launched, I heard some content creators say the game was about 3 to 4 hours long, and I personally don't see how you could get through the game that quickly unless you're rushing through it. I think 5 to 6 hours is possible if you don't hang around, but 6 to 7 hours is more likely, especially if you play co-op with a friend messing around. I also recommend going onto the hard difficulty in co-op, as it's pretty easy on standard difficulty. The game is pricey though at $50, and I do think it's overpriced for what you get. There is a horde mode, but it just isn't long enough to warrant that price. It's a good game overall though, and I really enjoyed it, but I think this one's best to wishlist and grab on a sale. And that's the end of the video. I want to give a huge thanks to my Patreon and YouTube member supporters. If anyone has made it this far and they want to help support me from $1 per month, then I'll put links in the description, and thanks for your time.